take it off her. His mother yanked the necklace from Nia's neck. The cold metal scraped her skin as her husband fastened it around his mistress and smiled. Laughter drifted through the ballroom. Nia stood alone, humiliated, without reaching for it. The louder they celebrated, the closer they came to losing everything. The ballroom glowed gold that night. Crystal chandeliers hung low over a sea of silk dresses and pressed suits. Soft music floated above the clink of glasses. It was supposed to be a celebration. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of Nia standing beside a man named Sebastian, smiling through every storm, holding her tongue through every insult, swallowing every small cruelty for the sake of peace. She wore a deep blue gown that hugged her like calm water. Her hair was pinned high. Her face was soft and steady. And around her neck sat a necklace Sebastian had given her that very morning. He had pressed the velvet box into her hands and called it a gift of love. He had looked into her eyes and told her she was the only woman he would ever need. She believed him. After 5 years, she still believed him. That was her first mistake of the night. The guests filled every table, faces she knew, faces she had cooked for, faces she had welcomed into her home. They raised their glasses as Sebastian climbed onto the small stage at the front of the room. He looked handsome up there, tall and easy, glowing under the warm lights. Nia watched him with shining eyes, waiting for the words every wife dreams of hearing on a night like this. "Tonight," Sebastian said, lifting his glass high, "I want to honor the woman who completes me, the woman who makes me feel like a king, the woman who holds my whole heart in her hands." Nia's chest lifted. A warm smile spread across her lips. She took one small step forward, ready to meet him, ready to be claimed in front of everyone she knew. But Sebastian did not look at her. He turned, slow and deliberate, away from his wife and toward a woman seated near the front. A woman in a bright red dress. A woman with a knowing smile already curling on her lips. A woman named Camille. "To Camille," Sebastian said, his voice soft and sure. "My dearest friend, my peace, my joy, the one who truly understands me." The room went still for the length of one held breath. A fork stopped halfway to a mouth. A glass paused in the air. Then a few uneasy chuckles broke the silence, scattered and nervous, like people unsure whether they had just witnessed a joke or a crime. Nia froze where she stood. Her own glass trembled in her hand. She told herself she had misheard him. She told herself it was some strange joke, some toast she did not understand. Her smile stayed frozen on her face, even as something deep inside her chest began to crack down the middle. Camille rose from her seat. She smoothed her red dress with both hands, slow and proud, and walked toward the stage like she had been invited there 100 times before. Like she belonged. The crowd parted for her, and Nia stood rooted to the floor, watching another woman walk into the moment that was supposed to be hers. That was when Eleanor stood up. Eleanor was Sebastian's mother, and she had never once liked Nia. For 5 long years, she had looked at her son's wife the way a person looks at a stain they cannot scrub out of fine cloth. She had made her feelings known in 1,000 small ways. Cold words, sharp looks, little insults dressed up as advice. But she had never gone this far in public, until tonight. She crossed the marble floor with her chin lifted high, her heels clicking like a slow drumbeat, every eye in the room following her. She stopped directly in front of Nia, close enough that Nia could smell her heavy perfume. "That necklace," Eleanor said, loud and clear, loud enough for the front tables to hear every word, was never meant for someone like you. It is wasted on a woman who came from nothing. Before Nia could even open her mouth, Eleanor reached up with both hands and grabbed the chain at the back of her neck. She pulled. Hard. The clasp dug into Nia's skin and snapped. The cold metal scraped a thin red line across the back of her neck as it tore free. Nia gasped. Her hand flew up to her throat, her fingers pressing against the burning spot where the chain had been. Pain flickered across her face, sharp and sudden. But she did not fight back. She did not scream. She did not grab for the necklace dangling now from Eleanor's fist. She simply stood there, stunned, her breath caught somewhere between her heart and her mouth. Eleanor turned, the necklace swinging from her hand, and held it out to her son like an offering. "Here," she said, "give it where it belongs." Sebastian took it without a flicker of shame. He stepped down from the stage, the diamonds glinting in his palm, and walked straight to Camille. He lifted her hair gently with one hand. Then he draped the necklace around the other woman's throat and fastened the clasp, his fingers lingering on her skin. He stepped back to admire it, and he smiled like a man who had just won a prize he had wanted for a very long time. "It looks better here," he said. It always did. The room broke open. Some guests laughed out loud, sharp and cruel. Others looked down at their plates, suddenly fascinated by their food, too cowardly to meet anyone's eyes. A few whispered behind their hands, leaning close to share the delicious shock of it all. And in the very center of that gold-lit room, surrounded by 100 people she had once called friends, stood Nia, alone, the red mark of the broken clasp still burning on the back of her neck. She did not cry. Not one tear fell. She did not drop to her knees or beg for an explanation. She pressed her hand flat against the cold, empty spot on her neck where the necklace had been. And she breathed. Slow, deep, steady, as if she were holding something inside that the rest of them could not see. A woman at a nearby table leaned toward her husband and murmured that someone should do something, that this was too cruel even for these people. But she did not rise. None of them rose. They only watched, hungry for the next moment, the way crowds always are when someone else is the one bleeding. Camille reached up and touched the diamonds at her own throat now, turning her head slightly so the light could catch them. She looked straight at Nia as she did it, and her smile widened, slow and sure. She wanted Nia to see. She wanted Nia to break. That was the prize she had truly come for, more than any man and more than any necklace. But Nia gave her nothing. No tears, no trembling lip, no begging. She only stood there, calm as still water, and that calm seemed to confuse them all far more than any scream would have. For a single strange moment, the laughter wavered, as if some part of the room sensed that something was wrong with this picture, that the broken woman in the middle of the floor did not look nearly as broken as she should. In the far corner of the ballroom, an older man in a quiet gray suit set down his glass without a sound. He had been watching the entire scene unfold, every cruel second of it. His name was Theodore, and almost no one in that grand room knew who he truly was or why he had been invited. When he saw the look on Nia's face, his jaw went tight. His old hands curled into fists at his sides. He rose from his chair and took one step forward, ready to cross the room, ready to put a stop to all of it. But Nia felt his movement. She lifted her eyes and found him across the crowded floor, and she gave him the smallest shake of her head. Barely a movement at all. Not yet. Theodore stopped where he stood. He read the message in her eyes the way he had learned to over many years. He let out a slow breath, gave her the slightest nod, and lowered himself back into his chair. Nia turned away from her husband, away from the laughing crowd, away from the woman wearing her necklace. She gathered her gown in one hand, lifted her chin, and walked toward the tall doors with her back perfectly straight. The laughter chased her every step of the way, bouncing off the marble, following her out into the cold night air. They thought they had broken her that night. They thought they had finally put her in her place. They had no idea that they had just lit the first match of a fire that would burn their whole world to the ground. To understand who Nia truly was, you have to go back. Far back, to a small, dusty town in Georgia, where a little girl once learned the difference between what merely shines and what is truly worth something. Her grandmother raised her in the back room of an old workshop, a narrow space that smelled of stone dust and machine oil, where the only light came through a single cracked window. There, before she was even tall enough to reach the work table, Nia learned to hold a rough stone in her small hands and feel for the hidden beauty trapped inside it. Her grandmother wore a pendant every single day on a worn leather cord, a single, uncut diamond, rough and gray, with nothing pretty about it at all. One quiet evening, Nia asked her why she had never polished it to make it sparkle like the ones in the shop windows. The old woman smiled and took the girl's hand. She pressed the rough stone into her palm and closed her small fingers around it. "A real diamond doesn't need to shine to be worth everything, child," she said. "It waits. It knows exactly what it is, even when nobody else can see it. You remember that. No matter what the world tells you, you remember what you are." Nia kept that pendant her whole life. She wore it under her gown that very night, hidden against her heart, while strangers laughed at her in a room full of gold. She had been the girl who gave away her first paycheck to a neighbor who could not pay her rent. The girl who believed loyalty was worth more than money, and that patience was a kind of strength most people never understood. That girl had never truly left her. She had only learned how to wait. After the gala, things did not get better. They got worse, far worse. Sebastian brought Camille into their home within the week. He called it temporary. He said she only needed a place to stay while she sorted out her troubles, that it was the decent thing to do. But Camille moved through the house like she already owned it. She draped her things over the furniture. She left her perfume hanging in every room. She gave little orders to the staff in a sweet voice and watched Nia from the corner of her eye, waiting to see if she would break. Nia did not break. She watched. She listened. She waited. In those quiet weeks, she noticed everything. She noticed how Camille whispered with Eleanor in the hallways, the two of them falling silent whenever she passed. She noticed the way Sebastian left his phone face down on the table now, the way he came home later and later, the way he no longer even bothered to lie well. She noticed the small things being moved out of the house, a painting here, a piece of silver there, slipped away quietly as if they thought she would not see. She saw all of it, and she filed each piece away in her mind, calm and patient, like a woman sorting stones by their true worth. Eleanor came around more often now, too. She rearranged the kitchen to her own liking. She moved the furniture. She spoke to the household staff as if Nia were not even in the room, as if she were a piece of the wallpaper. When Nia tried to speak, Eleanor talked right over her. When Nia entered a room, Eleanor would gather her things and leave it, wrinkling her nose like she had smelled something foul. "You should be grateful," Eleanor told her one morning over breakfast, stirring her coffee without looking up. My son took you in when you had nothing. Nothing at all. You came from dirt, and he lifted you out of it. Don't you ever forget where you came from." Nia set down her cup. She looked at the older woman for a long moment. Then she simply nodded once and walked away, without a word. Eleanor mistook her silence for surrender. It was anything but. Later that same day, Eleanor went a step further. She gathered a few of Nia's things from the bedroom, dresses, small keepsakes, a framed photograph, and had them carried out to a guest room at the far end of the house, the smallest and coldest one. "Camille will be more comfortable in the main suite," she announced, not even bothering to look at Nia as she said it. "You understand. It only makes sense." Nia stood in the doorway of the little room and looked at her few belongings stacked on the narrow bed. She said nothing. She simply set down the rough pendant on the windowsill where the morning light could reach it, and she let them think they had pushed her into a corner. They did not understand that she had chosen that corner herself. Sebastian believed every poisonous word his mother fed him. In his mind, Nia was nothing more than a poor girl he had generously rescued from a hard life. A simple woman who depended on him for the roof over her head, the clothes on her back, the food on her plate. He never once stopped to wonder how their grand home was truly paid for. He never asked why the heavy bills always seemed to handle themselves so quietly. He never questioned where the money really came from. He simply assumed it was his. The way he assumed everything good in his life was his by right. One evening, he found her in the study and came to her with a thick stack of papers and a pen. He set them on the desk in front of her with an easy smile. "Just some paperwork, sweetheart," he said. "Nothing to worry about. Simplifying our finances, making everything easier for both of us. Sign right here, at the bottom of each page." Nia picked up the papers. She read them slowly, line by line, and she understood them far better than Sebastian could ever have imagined. These documents were not about simplifying anything. They were about taking. They moved the accounts, the property, the holdings, everything into his name alone. He was trying to strip her of all she had while smiling in her face. He truly believed she was too simple to read between the lines. She set the pen down gently on the desk. "Let me read these over properly first," she said, her voice soft and calm. Sebastian frowned, the easy smile slipping. "What is there to read? It's just numbers and legal talk. You wouldn't understand half of it anyway. Just trust me and sign." She lifted her eyes to his and gave him a small, tired smile. "I will look them over," she said again. And something in the steadiness of her voice made him pause, though he could not have said why. That night at dinner, Camille wore the stolen necklace. She had worn it every evening since the gala, but tonight she touched it again and again at the table, letting the diamonds catch the candlelight, smiling across at Nia to make absolutely sure she saw. "It really is a beautiful piece, isn't it?" Camille said sweetly, tilting her head. "Funny how some things just find their way to their right owner in the end, don't you think?" Eleanor laughed. Sebastian laughed. The two of them shared a look of pure satisfaction across the table. Nia sat in silence, her plate untouched before her, her hand drifting up beneath her collar to the rough pendant hidden there against her skin. She held it for a moment between her fingers. Then she lowered her hand and said nothing at all. The days that followed seemed to hollow her out from the inside. She began to move through the great house like a ghost, quiet and pale, drifting from room to room. She ate less and less. She stopped speaking unless someone spoke to her first. The light in her eyes dimmed down to almost nothing. To everyone who watched her, to Sebastian, To Eleanor, to Camille, she looked like a woman who had finally and completely been broken. That was exactly what she wanted them to believe. Because late one night, when the house had gone dark and silent and everyone else was deep in sleep, Nia sat alone in her room with the curtains drawn. She held the rough gray pendant up to the thin light of the moon and turned it slowly between her fingers, the way her grandmother had taught her so many years ago. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. The broken woman they thought they had created was nowhere to be found. She reached for her phone and made a single call. A voice answered on the very first ring, as if it had been waiting for weeks. It was Theodore. "It's time," he said quietly. "Everything is ready. Every piece is in place. Just say the word." Nia closed her eyes. She drew in one long, slow breath, the kind of breath a person takes before stepping off the edge of something. And then she spoke a single calm word into the phone. "Begin." 3 weeks passed in near silence. The whispers about Nia faded from the dinner tables and the phone calls. The story grew old, replaced by newer gossip. And in that quiet, Sebastian grew bolder. Camille grew comfortable. Eleanor grew proud and sure of herself. The three of them believed the story was finished, that they had won, that the poor, broken wife had simply faded into the background of their bright new lives. The story was not finished. It had only just truly begun. Word began to spread through the city of a grand event coming soon, the unveiling of a brand new flagship diamond collection by one of the most powerful and secretive jewelry houses in the entire country. It was the kind of event that drew everyone who mattered: the press, the investors, the old money and the new, the powerful and the proud, all gathered together under one glittering roof for a single, dazzling night. Sebastian heard about it and saw nothing but opportunity. He bragged loudly to anyone who would listen that he knew people on the inside, that he had connections in high places, that getting in was no trouble at all for a man like him. He pulled every string he could find until at last an invitation arrived. He brought Camille on his arm, and she wore the stolen necklace like a crown, certain it would dazzle the crowd. Eleanor came too, dressed in the finest gown she owned, eager to be seen mingling among the city's elite. The three of them walked into a hall even grander than the ballroom from the gala. The floors were polished marble that threw back the light. Towering glass cases lined the walls, each one holding diamonds that glittered under perfectly aimed spotlights. Soft music played. Champagne flowed. Sebastian puffed out his chest and leaned close to Camille. "This," he whispered, "is the kind of world we were always meant to live in. Look at it. This is us now." Then the room began to shift. A hush moved through the crowd, starting at the tall entrance doors and rolling backward through the hall like a slow wave across water. Heads began to turn. Conversations died in mid-sentence. Glasses lowered. And through those great doors walked a woman in a gown the color of midnight. Her head held high, her steps slow and certain, each one landing like she had walked this floor 1,000 times before. It was Nia. But it was not the Nia they thought they knew. Gone was the dull-eyed ghost who drifted through the house. Gone was the silent, shrinking woman they had grown so used to mocking. This woman moved like she owned the very air in the room. The well-dressed staff straightened their backs as she passed. A man in a crisp, dark suit hurried to her side and spoke quietly into her ear. She listened, then nodded once, and he hurried away to carry out whatever she had said. Sebastian's confident smile faltered and died on his lips. Eleanor's mouth fell slowly open. Camille's hand drifted up on its own to touch the necklace at her throat, as if it had suddenly grown heavy. A bright spotlight found Nia as she reached the very center of the great hall. The music stopped. A host stepped forward, microphone in hand, his voice ringing out clear and strong across the silent crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "it is our deepest and greatest honor tonight to welcome the founder and the owner of this house. The visionary whose hands built every single thing you see around you. The woman who has guarded her name in private for many years and who graces us with her presence at last." He turned to Nia and bowed his head low in respect. "Please, everyone, welcome the mind and the heart behind this entire empire." Gasps rippled across the room like wind through tall grass. Sebastian felt the marble floor tilt beneath his polished shoes. The name that everyone in the industry whispered with awe and respect. The secret owner that no one had ever seen. The quiet genius behind a house of diamonds worth more than most people could ever dream of counting, now stood in the center of the room for all to see. And she was his wife. The woman his mother had torn a necklace from. The woman he had called poor. Cameras flashed from the press corner, a sudden storm of light, all of them turning toward Nia at once. Reporters who had spent years trying to put a face to the empire scrambled forward, calling her name, desperate for the photograph the whole industry had wanted for a decade. The most important people in the room, men and women who would not have given Sebastian the time of day, now pressed closer just to be near her, just to be seen nodding in her direction. The very world that Sebastian had bragged about belonging to was bowing, and it was not bowing to him. The empire was not inherited. No one had handed it to her. No rich relative had died and left it in her lap. Nia had built it with her own two hands, stone by stone, year by patient year, starting in the back room of her grandmother's dusty little workshop in a forgotten Georgia town. She had begun by polishing gems for other people. Then she had started selling a few of her own. Then she had built a name so quietly, so carefully, hiding her face behind a company and layers of trusted partners, that the wider world had never once connected the woman to the fortune. And that fortune had grown vast, large enough to buy and sell every proud and laughing guest in that room 10 times over, and never feel the loss. The older man from the gala, Theodore, stepped up to stand beside her. He was the chairman of her company, her oldest and most trusted partner, the man who had quietly protected her name and her stake through every storm for many long years. He looked out across the stunned crowd with cold, steady, knowing eyes, and he said nothing. He did not need to. Nia's gaze moved slowly and calmly across the sea of faces until at last it came to rest on Camille, on the necklace still hanging around the other woman's throat. "That piece," Nia said, and her voice was calm and clear and carried effortlessly to every corner of the hall, "belongs to my collection. It was taken from my home without my permission. It is the property of this house." She gave the smallest nod toward the security team standing near the wall. "Please recover it." 2 guards moved at once toward Camille. The woman in the red dress went white as paper. Her fingers fumbled at her neck, shaking, useless. She looked to Sebastian for help, but he could only stare. The guards reached her, and one of them unclasped the necklace and lifted it away from her throat, gently and firmly, as though it had never belonged to her for a single moment. Because the truth was, it never had. Sebastian broke from his frozen shock and rushed forward, his face twisting with panic. Nia, wait, please. We can talk about this." There's been some kind of misunderstanding, that's all. Just let me explain. Nia turned to face him. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to raise it. The whole room had fallen so silent that a whisper would have carried. "There is no misunderstanding, Sebastian," she said quietly. "There never was. For 5 years, I was right in front of you. You just never once bothered to truly look." Eleanor pushed forward now, her face flushed, trying desperately to find the sharp and cutting words she had carried so easily her whole life. Her mouth opened, but for the first time in all her years, nothing came out, not a single word. The whole room was watching her, and the whole room now understood, beyond any doubt, exactly who held the real power and who never had. Nia did not gloat. She did not laugh in their faces. She did not throw their cruelty back at them. She simply turned away from the three of them and walked toward the stage to begin the unveiling of her collection, leaving Sebastian, Eleanor, and Camille standing alone in the cold and terrible silence they themselves had built. As she climbed the steps to the stage, the entire hall rose to its feet. The applause began slow, then swelled until it filled every corner of the room, a thunder of hands for the woman they had only just learned the name of. Nia stood in the center of the light, calm and steady, the rough pendant resting beneath her gown against her heart. She thought just for a moment of a dusty back room and a cracked window and an old woman pressing a gray stone into a little girl's hand. And she understood at last that her grandmother had been right about everything. A real diamond does not need to shine to be worth everything. It only needs to wait. And then, when the time is finally right, it lets the whole world see what it always was. What came next arrived not with shouting or with fists, but with quiet, certain, unstoppable force. The grand home that Sebastian had bragged about for years was never truly his. It had always been held under Nia's company, just one of many properties listed quietly in her name. Within a matter of days, the paperwork made everything painfully clear. He had no legal claim to any of it, not the house, not the cars, not the comfortable life. He had been living inside her world the entire time, walking through her halls, sleeping under her roof, eating at her table, too blind and too proud to ever once see the truth of where it all came from. The powerful connections that Sebastian had loved so much to brag about melted away like ice in the sun. The important people he had claimed to know so well would no longer take his calls. The doors that had always swung open for him now slammed shut, one after another. In the space of a single night, he had gone from a man who strode into elite halls with his chin in the air to a man that no one in the city wanted to be seen standing beside. Camille did not wait around to comfort him. The very moment the money and the status and the comfort vanished, so did she. She packed her bags without ceremony and walked out the door without so much as a goodbye, already searching for the next man with a full pocket and an empty heart to fill. The love she had once sworn to Sebastian disappeared the instant there was nothing left for her to take from him. He finally saw her clearly for exactly what she truly was. But by then, it was far, far too late. Eleanor suffered perhaps the cruelest fall of them all. The high society she had bowed and scraped to her whole life, the very circles she had used as a weapon to look down on Nia, now turned their backs on her all at once. The story spread through the city like wildfire. The tale of how Eleanor had torn a necklace from the throat of the very woman who secretly owned the greatest diamond empire in the land. Overnight, she became a cautionary tale. A bitter joke whispered behind hands at the elegant parties she was suddenly no longer invited to attend. The proud woman who had called Nia dirt now found herself frozen out of every gilded room she had ever cared about. Through all of it, Nia never once raised a hand against any of them. She never screamed. She never cursed their names. She never chased after revenge with cruelty in her heart. She simply let the truth do what the truth always does, given enough time and patience. She let the contracts speak. She let the ownership speak. She let her quiet authority and everything she had so patiently built speak for her, far louder than any angry words ever could. Justice did not come from her fists. It came from the long, careful work of her own steady hands. Sebastian tried, in the weeks that followed, to reach her. He sent letters. He left long messages, his voice cracking, swinging between anger and apology, and back again. He stood outside the gates of a property he no longer had any right to enter and called her name into the dark. He told himself that if he could only speak to her, only explain, only remind her of the good years, she would soften. He had spent 5 years certain she needed him. He could not understand, even now, that it had always been the other way around. Nia never answered, not out of cruelty, but because there was simply nothing left to say. She had said all of it with a single calm word into a phone, weeks before, on a dark and silent night. And when it was all finally done, Nia reached up and fastened her grandmother's rough gray pendant back around her own neck, settling it gently into the very spot where the stolen necklace had once been torn away in front of a laughing crowd. She walked out of that old life with her dignity whole, her spirit unbroken, and her head held high. She did not look back, not even once. Months later, the noise and the glitter of that other world felt very far away, like a loud dream slowly fading after waking. Nia returned to the small town in Georgia where it had all begun. She returned to a workshop she had carefully and lovingly restored with her own money and her own hands. The very same place where her grandmother had once taught her to find the beauty hidden inside an ugly stone. The familiar dust still hung soft in the air. The afternoon light still slanted in through that single cracked window. And standing inside it once more, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt at home. A young girl sat at the work table beside her now, a curious child from the neighborhood with bright eyes and quick, eager hands. Nia placed a rough, uncut stone into the girl's small palm and gently guided her little fingers across its surface, the same way her own fingers had once been guided long ago. "It doesn't look like much yet, does it?" Nia asked her softly, smiling. The girl turned the dull gray stone over and shook her head, a little disappointed. Nia's smile deepened. "That right there is the secret," she said. "A real diamond doesn't need to shine to be worth everything. It waits. It knows exactly what it is, even when nobody else can see it yet. You hold on to that, child. You hold on to it tight." When the lesson was finished and the girl had run home for supper, Nia walked to the window. She lifted her grandmother's pendant from around her neck and hung it carefully on the latch, where the warm afternoon sun could pass straight through the rough stone. And for just one quiet moment, the dull gray diamond caught the light and seemed to glow from somewhere deep, deep inside itself. And here is the truth that this story leaves behind for you to carry. The people who humiliate you in public very often have no idea at all what you carry quietly inside. Your worth was never theirs to measure or to decide. The loudest rooms are so often filled with the emptiest people, and the quietest woman standing alone in the corner may be holding more strength, more value, and more grace than they could ever begin to dream of. So build your life quietly. Do your work patiently. Let your true worth speak for itself when the right time finally comes. And no matter who tries to tell you otherwise, never once let anyone convince you that you are small. Nia found her peace in the end, not in revenge and not in riches, but in returning, at long last, to exactly who she had always been. If Nia's silence taught you something tonight, do one small thing for me. Comment one single word down below. Just one. Strength. Let us know that you understand what it truly means to wait, to endure in silence, and then to rise when the moment is right. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and join a family of people who believe with all their hearts that a quiet woman can change absolutely everything. And please, share this story with someone who needs to be reminded today that their worth is never decided by the people who underestimate them. Until the next story, take good care of your heart. You are worth so much more than you know.